Welcome to episode 18 of Two Pastors and a Plant. I'm Drew Narmore.
I'm JD Shaw.
This is JD Shaw. We're going to talk about a question today. And the question is, are celebrity pastors dangerous? Now, there's, I think, two different angles to this question. And the first is it dangerous for the pastor himself to sort of reach that level of, fame in a position that, it's not typically thought of to be famous, a pastor?
Well, I wouldn't know. I've never been there, but I've been told by some that I trust that yes, absolutely it's dangerous, because fame in Christianity, power in Christianity don't mix well to begin with, but certainly when you're a pastor, and the primary job of a pastor is to live among and tend to and feed a certain flock, fairly small group of people. I mean, you might get up to 1,000 in a big church, maybe 2,000, but if 2,000 people know you, that doesn't make you famous in our culture. That's his primary job, and so the wider his platform, let me back up. Just the wider the platform, the more opportunity there is for him to really neglect what should be primary, which is knowing and loving and tending and feeding the flock that God's given him. And again, I wouldn't know. I mean, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying Tim Keller's a man I admire a lot, and that's exactly what he says. Don Carson's a man I admire a lot. That's what he's said. John Piper, they've all said that. So it's dangerous in that sense. And then it's also dangerous just because the temptation, I would think, to worry more about how you're perceived in the wider culture, how many followers you have on Twitter, how many books you're selling, how big are the conferences you're going to speak. I mean, that would just do a number on anybody. So once you get into the numbers game, I don't care what field you're in, it's going to diminish the quality of your work, because you're just looking to eventually the numbers
meet the quota the publisher has.
Yeah, eventually the numbers went out, and so you're not really worried about quality anymore. You're just trying to reach a bigger audience. I think everybody, no matter what your field, would agree that's a problem.
Well, we can also agree that that we've been blessed in a lot of ways by these, celebrity pastors like Tim Keller, and it's going to be a very, very sad day when some of these guys, like whenever Lord willing, or John Piper passes. It's going to be a very sad day for me. It's very influential in my life. But the second angle to this question is geared towards the church. Like for us, is it dangerous for us to have these men be, I would say, maybe the most influential people in our life? I think this is a uniquely interesting question because of the situation we're in now. This is 2020 in July, where a lot of churches are just now starting to meet together, and some people may have gotten into this sort of rhythm of not watching their church's service, but instead turning on their favorite pastor's sermon. And so, why might it be dangerous in that aspect for the church to gravitate more towards John Piper, Tim Keller, these guys, as opposed to the person, the pastor that God's given to your church?
Well, hopefully the reason the pastor is a celebrity is because he's really gifted at explaining the Word of God. And I don't know where I'd be if it weren't for Tim Keller. He's had more impact on me than anybody else. I love some other men like John Piper, John MacArthur. Learned a great deal from them, but man, I don't know where I'd be without Tim Keller's influence. And I've only met him twice, and that was just long enough basically to shake his hand. It's only because of the abstracted teaching that I've gotten from him, whether through his books or his sermons. So in that sense, celebrity pastors are a tremendous gift to the church. I'm maybe one of the first celebrity pastors in church history would have been St. Augustine, and I think he got to be a pretty big deal before he died. And I mean, I'm 1,600 years later, I'm reading his stuff and benefiting from it. So in that sense, they're a great, great gift to the church. But the problem would be if you thought that you could forsake the assembly of believers in your community, and that just watching one of these guys online would feed you enough for you to grow as a Christian. Well, that's just nonsense.
Yeah,
we're not. We are in soul. We are body and soul, And so we are meant to have physical, connections with other people, be in the same room with other people, and meant to, at right times embrace one another and hold each other's hands literally. And so if you think that just, watching somebody online, again, the guys that I trust who are celebrity pastors would say, absolutely not. That is not going to feed you spiritually. It's not going to sustain you. And I really don't, I remember Matt Chandler used to have this disclaimer. I don't know if he still does, but before the Village Church sermons would roll out, he would say, he would, before the video began of his sermon, he would have this little disclaimer like, I'm so glad you're watching and using this resource, but this is not a substitute for your local church. Apparently he'd gotten word that Christians were just gathering around his videos and not being a part of a church in their community. I don't know. I just don't know how much that happens because of my family's experience during the pandemic when we weren't meeting. And I'm the pastor, okay? This is their dad and husband that's on the TV. It got increasingly hard really quick for everybody to want to watch that TV, most of all me. And there was an awful lot of, picking up our phones and kind of doing some of this while I'm up there, preaching on the screen. And if anybody you would think would have a vested interest, it's my family. So I just don't know how long that happens. I just don't think there are many people out there who get up at 9:30 on Sunday morning and they're all ready to watch the TV of this celebrity pastor who's 2 time zones away. I just can't imagine there's a large number of people that actually do that. But I could be wrong.
I wonder if it's going to increase because of the situation we're in. I mean, that is a fear that I've had for months. I hope you're right. I hope it's not going to be an issue. But I have met people, I'm preaching this Sunday, so if you went online and just randomly picked any Tim Keller sermon, it would 100% be better than what I'm about to say on Sunday morning.
I don't know about that.
So, okay. Well,
I've listened to a lot of him and you, and I wouldn't say that at all. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, objectively, he is a better preacher. And I'm not just talking about me. Let's just take me out of the equation then. That probably wasn't a good idea. But yeah, I've heard a lot of great sermons from these people that I listen to, and you would say it's all about the gathering, and that's the main purpose of getting together, not so much the level of quality of the sermon, right?
Well, no, I mean, it's important. I would say do both. I mean, listen to the guys that feed you. That's what I do.
Yeah.
Listen to the guys that feed you, but don't forsake the assembly of believers. Mm-hmm. And as long as you've got a man up there who is faithfully trying to explain the scriptures to you, you're going to benefit. You're going to benefit both directly from his teaching and from the experience of being in the room with everybody else while the singing is going on, while the praying is going on, while the Lord's Supper is being served. You're going to benefit from all the relationships you're forming by being around these people week in and week out for years. You're going to benefit from that, the totality of the experience. But by all means, go home on Sunday afternoon and listen to a Tim Keller sermon. Why not do both?
I mean, there's a lot that we can. There's many different directions we can go down here, but I want to talk a little bit more about preaching and what it is. And I use this example a lot because I remember how profound it was. I think it was 2016, where our community went through a horrible tragedy, plane crash. 3 families lost their parents, and that morning you preached a sermon on suffering, and the application was tied to that. And there was nobody was not crying. I mean, it was we needed that. The community needed that. And there's another element to this about what preaching is taking the scriptures and applying it to the context that you're preaching in, that you can't get from Keller, who's applying it to his context in New York. And so I think we might see a great sermon, but also miss out on the context that Mississippi, Oxford, Mississippi, and Minneapolis, Minnesota, and New York are completely different places, and God has, again, placed that church there for you because of that as well. Mm-hmm. And there's huge, that's a lot about what preaching. We might have another topic about that, but
yeah, I mean, so again, I go back to we are flesh and blood creatures. We're not just souls that happen to be in these celluloid containers, and one day we're going to be free from these containers and float around in the ether. The resurrection means we're going to be body and soul forever. That's what it means to be human. And so to abstract out preaching from the preacher is to work against what the Bible says human beings are. You know, they're not just a disembodied voice in the earbud, but it's a person, you know, flesh and blood. And it's not, again, it's a great thing to avail yourselves of the gifts and talents of these men, but just don't do it to the neglect of a real life, a real community right there where you live. Because it is true. I mean, you know, right now I'm listening to some Tim Keller sermons that are 30 years old. So not only is it New York, New York, it's 1990. And, you know, I have to kind of remember back what was going on in 1990. There's nothing like being able to gather with the people you love, that you're in covenant with, and somebody you trust is up there teaching, and they're applying the word to you, and you've all lived in the same community for the past week. That is God's great gift, and we neglect it to our peril.
Thanks for those answers. Enjoyed that conversation. And we would love to, like, it's not that we're running out of ideas by any means, but you have questions that I'm sure you would love for JD and myself to talk about. We'd love to know what they are. So please email the church, send us a message on Facebook, comment on the video below. We'd love to know what those are. We can talk about it. So we will be back next week, hopefully. I think I've said this before, but I'm pretty confident that next week we will have a different setup and it'll look a lot better.
Be in a new building.
Be in a new building, Lord willing. So
Lord willing.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.